happy we managed it. After 3 years, we tried. Fruitful attempts in the end. And I also like to accept to come to courses where you deal with issues related to landscaping, architecture, because I have to remember that I was an architect as background, and I still like it very much, the smell of maquettes and this kind of things when I enter in a room in a faculty of architecture, and I miss a little bit of it. So, and I did my thesis in landscape architecture actually, so it was perfect. It's a perfect point of convergence of the things I did in the past. I just prepared something. I don't know where I will go, in which direction, because normally when I still don't know the people, I prepare something that I think is meaningful, and then maybe you start asking me things, and I see that another direction is more fruitful, and so I change. So don't enter in crisis if I move fast in my PowerPoint, because I'm actually I don't have a good relation with PowerPoints, because I pervert them usually. Okay, so if you see there are 100 slides, don't panic, because I will not show you all the 100 slides. Okay, it's just like a reservoir for like water. So I just wanted to point out that this is not an easy moment for democracy in the world, and I also in the last year passed through like a sort of professional crisis, asking to myself if what I had been doing for 20 years was useful, if it's so easy to convince people to go back in the state of rule of law and in human rights. In few months you can lose 20 years or 30 years of gains. But then after this momentary crisis, which was determined especially from the crisis of democracy in Brazil in the last year, I got back to work daily with people, and I realized that yes, participation is still a place where you can slowly make people change through creating a critical environment where people start to think, which is good in a society where sometimes we forget to think, and so to act accordingly. I mean, these are the elections of Portugal, the abstention rate in the last year. As you can see, we have 52% of abstention rate. In the presidential election, we reached the 65% of abstention rate, so people that stay home in the day of the election. And look at the Portuguese abroad, which are actually 6 million out of 16 million of Portuguese. 6 of them, we are a migrating country, so 6 million live abroad, and these 6 million, 95% of them, they do not vote for elections. So I come from a country that has these figures when talking about representative democracy, but I come from the country where people has Facebook in a highest rate in Europe, okay? Everybody in Portugal has Facebook, and some people has 2 or 3 accounts, okay? And the question we can ask to ourselves is if Facebook is a place for civic participation, and possibly the answer is that it mainly makes a citizen feel as if they have participated. So in reality, in some cases, it's even still something to participation, because eluding ourselves to be participating, just putting a like on a fake news, we forget to think and to act accordingly. So the problem we are facing is to try to start from where we are. So people like to put likes everywhere, and try to scale up the ladder of civic engagement. This is not, I mean, a common ladder of participation. This is a specific ladder of participation that was done by the guys of the Sunflower Revolution in Taiwan, which are working on, it's a group of hackers that hackered many many ministries' website, official websites, in order to create a real transparency on the commitment of the official politics. And after 2 years of struggles in the streets and on the internet, they managed to elect an independent president, an independent prime minister, an independent mayor of Taipei, and all the traditional political party crashed down in few months. Okay, so renewing a lot politics in that country. Country, I mean, is not recognized as a country from the majority of other countries in the world. So maybe that is why it's a place good for experiments. But the idea is, how can we use the collectivism to try to engage people more deeply on more important things and on different scales of our political and civic life? I think the answer is in the creation of effective process of participation, which to be effective, they need a series of elements. First of all, in order to conquer the people, they have to happen early in a process of decision making, where there is still room to influence decision. Otherwise, people think that they are being called just to discuss the color of a bench. And they have to be constructive and solution-orienting, because otherwise we only create another web page of comments where people just complain about everything and they don't contribute to build something different. So they need to have visible effect also. They need to be oriented toward the common good, promoting a balance of interest, because sometimes we call participatory processes spaces where we are just summing individual preferences, and summing with the machine individual preferences does not create a space of discussion and raising awareness. They need a participant structure as inclusive as possible. That means that they have to complement what Norberto Bobbio was calling the unfulfilled promises of democracy. So participatory democracy practice must try to complement what the representative democracy was not able to give us. So especially in this moment, the involvement of the weakest people, which feel themselves so far from politics, or accept representative politics only for an immediate gain, like I pay you for voting me. I mean, there's illegal practice that are very common everywhere in the planet, unfortunately. And so that's why being inclusive does not mean being representative. Sometimes we imagine that the critique to a participatory process is not enough participatory because not all the actors were represented. And this is a big, in the United States you have a big group of called deliberationists that think that the only way to have a fair participation is to have a random selection of the population that represents all the strata, all the layers of the population, and putting them in a room and discussing with technicians. And this type of deliberation is always high in terms of discussion, arguments, creation of awareness, but it has a very strong limit. It involves only the person that are involved. So like 12 persons that represent a 2 million population city, okay? And the problem of our moment of history is that people do not trust not only politics, but do not trust any intermediate body that try to represent them. So they do not trust churches, they do not trust trade unions, they do not trust any environmental association, and so they don't feel represented by anybody than themselves. So the problem of having a deliberation based on so-called mini-public, so a small percentage of people putting in a room with 2 women, 2 elderly person, 2 Afro-descendant, 2 Asian, is that you represent a mini society and you have a good level of deliberation, but then in the end, all the other outside think that you have been discussing with your friends or your party members, and so everything they say for them is useless. So if you want to build the trust, you have to build spaces of participation where people can enter. So if they want, they can enter. So you have to use these methods that are called open door methods, where in every moment of the process, people can step in, okay? There are no boundaries that say, no, sorry, you have not been random selected this year, so you cannot participate. So the reaction of people are, okay, so this is a fake participatory process, because it's a process of invitation, okay? So it's very important to understand this aspect, because if our goal is recreating a trust between politics and people, we cannot act on the base of limits, borders, invitations, okay? We have to leave spaces open for everybody that wants critics, which is very important also when we talk about solution-oriented. The environment has to be solution-oriented, because if you enter in a room and you ask people what are your problem, you come out with everybody depressed, because everybody starts adding problems to problems, and the working environment becomes unsustainable. So you must say, thinking about the problem you have in mind for your area or for your city, for your world, try to imagine a solution. And then we compare solutions and we build a final solution altogether. But this does not mean forgetting about problems. Solution has to be linked to problems, because people want to know that when we have a space where you're dialoguing with your representative, someone is listening to your problem. So you must have the problem, but you have to overcome the problem. That is the dynamic that you have to build. And these spaces have to be responsive. The translation of French of responsive is reactivity. Responsiveness is about creating a chain of responsibility that in front of a problem can help to find a solution, and in case something blocks the line of construction of the solution, someone can be responsible for that blockage, okay? But in responsiveness, there is another component which the French word makes very visible. Reactivity means that you have to react, and you have to react in due time. What is a due time? It's the time that for people is meaningful for having a solution. If you ask two people what is the solution for your problem of unemployment, and then you say, okay, I will find a solution, thank you, and 3 years later you come and say, I have the solution for your unemployment, this is meaningless for people. Sorry, but in 3 years, either I die or I found a solution by myself. So it's important that politics are responsible also of the time in which they give the answer. And so that means relating with perception of people, because time obviously is something stretchable, no? And Sant'Agostino in the 5th century is defining time as a stretching of the soul, okay? So time is different according to your perception of time. And I think it's also important that participation can be continuous throughout the entire process of delivering a policy of a project. Why this is important? Because sometimes we forget about this, so we create a dialogue with people, and we ask, what do you want? I would like to have a square in front of my house instead of a dumping area. And the municipality say, okay, perfect, thank you very much. I will listen to I will satisfy your request. And then they pass the response to bureaucracy. Bureaucracy who doesn't live there. And so bureaucracy start to act in another way. So there is the architect who wants everything fantastic, want to do a sign, a design that make him, or her, but usually him, remembered and famous forever. And so starting doing something that is completely useless and meaningless for the people, okay? And so people react. I have an example where cycling lane in Lisbon, in the participatory budgeting of Lisbon some years ago, was decided people wanted to give 2 million euros to cycle lane, okay? Perfect. The municipality said, okay, we will do. And then we started discussing with the bureaucracy, what kind of cycle lane we will do. There are 2 types of cycle lanes. One are just in the park for relaxing on holidays, okay? And then there are other cycle lane which has to be built still in car parks in the streets, which are conceived as a new way of moving in the town that have to challenge the cars, okay? And what did the municipality do? Say, no, this second one is too complicated. People will protest if we're stealing space to the cars. So let's do the first type of cycle lane. So we have a park. We will steal to the park some kilometers of walking area, and we will build inside the cycle lane. And what happened is the people rioted against this cycle lane, blocked the caterpillar during the construction, and so what was supposed to be a participatory fund solution, it became a fueling of tensions, of new tensions. Why? Because the process was not coherently participatory from the decision on money to the design. It passed to the bureaucracy, the decision on the second thing. And the bureaucracy created something that was completely opposite of what people wanted. So that's an explanation of this continuity. So why I said that? Because in this moment we have a lot of participatory typologies of process. I will deal mainly with one, but we are having a lot, and many of them, they are very scattered, they don't talk to each other. And I will finish with the reflection of the need that we have a system of participation, like this is the system in a Brazilian city called Canoas, 13 different processes of participation that talk to each other on a platform. And why I'm interested to system of participation? Because I don't know, is this a seismic area or not? No, not much. Okay, but in a seismic area, normally what happens is that every wall moves by its own during the earthquake, okay? And what is normally built to avoid this are the so-called anti-seismic cages that maintain all the walls together in order that they act as an entire construction. So instead of going each wall on different direction, they will play like an entire construction, and in the end, the house will maybe sink, but will sink all together. It will still be a house, and the people will not die inside. Okay? So the idea, I think, is the same. For fighting against the crisis of democracy, the multiple crises of democracy, which are not only political, financial, they are a civilization crisis. That means that we are passing from a society where the commons were important to a society where the only individual is important. So passing through this crisis, we have to react, and having participatory processes which are just targeting small groups, small topics, will not help this unless these processes are put to work all together. So that is obviously my vision. but is the thing I'm working with. So I have to click here, no? That was the, yeah. Yeah, but it's not appearing. That's nice. Okay, thanks. Okay, this video is the promotional video of a project I'm doing in this moment in 7 countries of Europe. The project that the professor who introduced me called Empatia, no? And what I think that there is on the background still the internet going on. This is another video. Can you hear? So maybe you can cancel that. This is a small game of 1.5 hours we do in schools to test how to do participatory budgeting. With students, we have 3 different versions for children, for teens, and from adults. And is a game in which we do the game and then we study the results together with the person in order to show how it's important to study the effects of things, which is what we do in university. Usually we don't just do things. We try to study the effects, no? And it's becoming viral in this moment. I'm doing every week in 2-3 places around Europe. And it's even in municipalities being used to try to reshape the participatory budgeting process. And I wanted to show you because much of the things that I will say now came out from the reflection of this project, in which we try to use gaming to make aware of how a participatory process can produce, even if in a short time, obviously, can produce results and can uncover a lot of things on how society is organized and function. So, do someone of you know already what is participatory budgeting? 2, 3, 4. Okay, so 4.5. Okay, well, someone is not sure. Okay. So I tried to define it, even if defining it is very difficult because of the many places where this happened. I was moving, and then I remembered that they asked me not to move, so okay. So participatory budgeting is something that associates narrative as numbers. Because when we imagine to talk about budget, we imagine numbers and we get scared. I did an interview to 2,000 people before starting a participatory budgeting, asking what part of the municipal acting you think you can contribute to, and the answer on budgeting were 0. So everybody imagine budget as a complicated field for an elite of economists, and nobody think that budget is in reality. Budget was born in the 18th century as a system that could create control over the executive. So kings, prime ministers, they were totally uncontrolled. So if you have a budget, you commit to do something, you get the money to do this, and you do with that budget, okay? So budget is a filter for promises, to know which promises will be taking place and which other are lies or utopias, okay? So, but then budget got so technical that only a small number of people was able to deal with budgets. And so, if budget was supposed as a mean to control politics by the opposition, it became impossible to control politics by the opposition, because the only people that were able to control the budget were high-level civil servants that were at the service of the people who were supposed to be controlled. So you cannot control the controller through which control the controllers. Okay, so in the end, budget became useless. So participatory budgeting was discovered as a way to restate budget as a place for controlling what is being done by the executive policy. So the politician who take measures and take action. And the way in which it does it is associating narrative with numbers. So participatory budgeting is a process of decision making that entrusts citizens. And when I talk about citizen, I don't mean just formal citizen. I mean all the people that live in a place according to, I don't know if someone of you has been reading Lefebvre about the right to the city, but the idea of Lefebvre was that the right to the city is the right of everybody who live and build the city. The economy, the culture. So the idea is that to participatory budgeting, not only the formal citizen, but everybody that live in a territory can participate and take decision on how to allocate parts of a municipal budget or another budget that affects them. Why I say that? Because normally we say that participatory budgeting is applied to a municipal level. First of all, exists participatory budgeting at a provincial or regional, and in Portugal now we are working on a national government level of participatory budgeting. But another budget that affects them include also agency, because in some cases budgets are not managed by the municipality, are managed by an agency of local development, an agency of water, an agency of gas, electricity, and so it's possible to decide about the budget of one of the agencies too. These agencies are of public interest, okay? Even if they have the form of a private law agency. So participatory budgeting is mainly a tool of civic pedagogy, so a space of learning by doing when people decide about things related to their daily life, and with this thing they think further and they start to learning skills and getting information related to governing complexity, legal constraints, shrinking resources, and feel responsibilized about decision making. This is an article that came out in these days in Portugal that is about 73 million of euros decided in the last 10 years by Portuguese people in participatory budgeting. So to make this more concrete, I will tell you a small story. The story is about a neighborhood in Lisbon that has only a small green area. It's actually a slope, not even a green area. And two architects that came to live in this place decided that they want to propose in the participatory budgeting this a garden in a place where the municipality wanted to do a parking lot, okay? They said, no, a park instead of a parking. And they started to do campaign on Facebook, on Twitter, and then they create some festivals in the streets, and they started gathering people and people and people. And in the end of this year, participatory budgeting, they got 10,000 votes that represent 1/5 of the entire population of the two neighbors, okay? That say, we want a park there. And the municipality was in panic because they have a rule in participatory budgeting that is, you cannot propose a thing where there is already an approved project by the municipality. But they proposed the thing there, they got 10,000 votes, and this is an electoral year in Portugal. So the municipality calculated, okay, 10,000 people voting against, in those two neighborhoods, the people who vote normally are 20,000. So if 10,000 vote against the ruling party because they don't want the park there, they are done. And so they started saying, okay, but we can harmonize. We can do a parking lot with a park around. And people say, no, we have an idea of developments in which this harmonization does not fit. Because for us, parking lots are attractors of traffic jam. They don't help to reduce the traffic. They encourage people to drive to the area because there is a new parking lot. And so they say, no, either the parking or nothing. We will see that you don't want to do what 10,000 people voted for. And so the municipality see that they cancel the project of the parking lots and they open it to the park. Okay, so you see something very small coming from two architects living there, that they decided not to have a car to move by bike, and they wanted a park for their children, transformed it into a sort of snowball, an avalanche in the municipality. And it became a place to discuss about the development of the city. Now the debate in Lisbon is about tourist concession. Why 80 new hotels in the lower city? This will become a city of tourists with no inhabitants anymore. And so many other things of the municipality in the year of election are being criticized, starting from this small thing. And these are all the things that people did. Look, they did a wonderful movie that you can find in this caracoldapeña.info. They did this wonderful video all together, putting together some skills, and with this video, they gained the election of participatory budgeting, and they were rewarded by the mayor in the old building of the municipality, taking somehow power, even if on a small slice of the budget. So, according to this story, what is not participatory budgeting? Is not a process in which you have discussion on the budget, but we have no influence on it. Is not an una tantum event. That means that you cannot do a fair of the budget for one day in the year and thinking you have been doing participatory budgeting. You must have a cycle of discussion, and people have to do proposal, and the proposal has to be evaluated and planned, and then you have the voting phase. So you need some months to do this. And it's not a devolutionary process where you just say, people, you have this money, do what you want, and you step back, okay? The dialogue, the tension with the municipality, as the story I told you showed, is very important, because to change politics, sometimes you have to change decision that had already been taken before. And this needs a long discussion and a serious interaction between different actors. So this is participatory budgeting in several countries of the world. This is Armenian, these things that is not understandable. So in the world now we have around 3,500 cities doing participatory budgeting. Now there are even more cities in Europe than in Latin America. You have a bunch of 20 cities in the United States in this moment, and you have cities like New York, Chicago, Boston, which has a participatory budgeting for young people, and this year will start Baltimore. So you have also big city, but we have to remember that the epicenter, how do you call it, an earthquake? The epicenter of the earthquake of participatory budgeting was in southern Brazil 30 years ago, in the middle of the 85, 86, when the first municipality were elected. Some small participatory budgeting started, and then bigger ones grew, and then it was contagious in all the planet. Today there are huge international institutions like the World Bank that use participatory budgeting, many cooperation entities that use participatory budgeting in development for the southern countries. In participatory budgeting, normally, if this is the average typology of a local budget, so you have 55% that go to salaries of civil servants. Then you have 30% of current expenditure. That means all makes functioning the local authority. And then you have investments, which mean bridges, roundabouts, streets, paving, and this kind of things, toilets. And these are normally the funds that are discussed by participatory budgeting. Why? Because they are more visible in the public space and they are more flexible. Because discussing on this part is almost impossible because there are trade union contract rules and it's difficult to cut here. Here you can cut, but with certain limitation, because you can eliminate paper, but you can eliminate the car of the mayor, but you cannot cancel the maintenance of schools, no? For example, of a park. So you still have to have some current expenditure which are granted for some typologies of public facilities. And so usually participatory budgeting deals with investments, but not only. In some cases, discuss also about part of the other expenditure. Another important thing is that in some cities, participatory budgeting is specifically targeted to redistribution of revenues. For example, this is a case in Brazil, in Belo Horizonte city. This is an index of urban quality that was done by 54 parameters about average wealth of families, number of children at school, this kind average education, titles, and this kind of things. And was used in the beginning as a demonstrative index to show to people how the different areas of the town were different in terms of wealth and other indicators. So the idea was we give this data to people, we take the data into account for deciding about how to redistribute the budgets. But then it passed from just representing the reality to drive the reality, because after 2 years, the index of quality of life was used to redistribute the money through the city. So the neighborhood with the lower index, so the poorest, the most abandoned, were going to receive a higher percentage of the budgets, and the wealthier were receiving less. So the budget became the index became performative. So for just being a description of reality, it started to influence the change in reality. So you see that this is a demonstration that when you talk about sustainability, you talk about different dimensions: social, economical, environmental, cultural dimension. And this passage here represents a little bit that, because in this index there are not just traditional index of wealth or of segregation of neighborhood. There are also index linked to the facilities. How many facilities has been built or are functioning in that area? So areas that are abandoned by the state and by the markets will get a lower score, and so will get more money, more public money in terms of investments. So this relation between different elements can become effective in this kind of vision. Yep. Yes.
What do
The
the red dots represent?
red dots.
They seem to be quite well.
Yeah, the red dots represent the works of participatory budgeting after 15 years. So the study that Belo Horizonte did in his urban area, except this area, was that there was no area in the city where there were not works decided by participatory budgeting in an array of 500 meters. Now the city of Cascais did the same in Portugal with a buffer of 1 kilometer. So there is no 1 kilometer of the municipality where in 5 years, not 15, 5 years of participatory budgeting, no things has been decided. So there are things, every 1 kilometer there is something decided by people in participatory budgeting. So a way to prove how distributive is somehow this system. And obviously you can give different meanings to participatory budgeting. You can decide to do this for very different reasons, for anti-corruption, for raising environmental awareness, for improving accountability or transparency, for in the Northern Europe, for example, I quote Sweden, they do participatory budgeting not because there is a need of doing things, but because they want people to meet while deciding and learn to know each other, because it's a very individualistic and country where people, they do not meet each other. The high level of welfare state creates a lot of passivity in people, okay? They do a question to the municipality and they wait for the answer. Nobody activates to find solutions. But for example, in Denmark, why there is participatory budgeting? Because there are many villages outside the town in rural areas which are losing population. And so in order to avoid to lose population, people are asked to tell what facilities would they want in the city to decide not to leave it and go to the main places, main cities, okay? So they take a village and they say, for deciding to stay, what do you want? And so I think that it's important that the meaning can be different, and for every meaning there are different means. So this is a matrix that you can find in this article online, which show that in different countries participatory budgeting can be different used in different ways. For example, in Germany is mainly used for participatory modernization, for trying to improve the capacities of the municipality to deliver services. In France is used to counterbalance the centralism of the state and create a local democracy. In Italy or Spain is more a participatory democracy to reconstruct the confidence in politics and this kind of things. So let's see some issues of architecture just to understand what does a participatory budgeting consist of. First of all, we have to imagine that participatory budgeting is not a space of decision making. It's done by two cycles, one of decision making and one of implementation and evaluation. No implementation and evaluation, nobody next year will be here to discuss again about what to do, because people, they do not like to lose their time for unproductive things. Okay, so many participatory budgeting died in the last year, including the famous Porto Alegre participatory budgeting in Brazil, because they didn't deliver the works that people was expecting to have. So normally participatory budgeting is done by cycles. This is a Portuguese cycle in the island of Madeira. So first of all, participatory meetings for people to start to detect problems. Then a process of collection of proposals, okay? Sometimes they can coincide in the same space. Then there is a technical analysis of feasibility in which the proposals are judged by civil servants, specialists, architects, engineers, lawyers, and they say, okay, this proposal is feasible, this is not feasible because it's in a private area, so it takes a lot of time for the expropriation and this kind of things. Traditionally, here in this phase, there was this mismatching between a participatory methodology and the traditional planning, no? So the bureaucrats were saying feasible, unfeasible. And unfeasible was the last word. Your project, your proposal cannot go to the next phase. People was very disappointed because people use participatory budgeting to test the honesty of a political institution. In which sense? There are proposals that people do and the municipality said for 20 years, no, this is a stupid thing. I don't want it, it's useless. So people come back to participatory budgeting and say, I will propose it again. It's not important if I win, because I will win if I can collect a lot of votes of people around the proposal. I want to know if the municipality will try to exclude this proposal with any excuse. Because if it does, it means that the process is a fake. If the proposal passes to the next phase, it will be up to me to collect enough votes to win, otherwise I will lose again. But the important is not the last phase, because this phase depends on the people. The phase important is this one, because this depends on politics. So if politics try to put apart the proposal, people discover that the lemma of the project, the process is people in the center. But then in the end, people are not in the center. People are marginal and bureaucracy decide as they want, okay? So that is important. Now in Portugal, in the first year of participatory budgeting, all the participatory budgeting were say yes, not. Then they realized that they were creating a boomerang. So they were doing a big effort to have angry people, and they decided that they do something very simple. That is calling the proponents to the room where the bureaucracy meets and say, look, your proposal is not feasible in this moment for this, and this reason. Let's change it together. Let's try to skip these difficulties and reshape the proposal so that your proposal can go to the next phase and be voted by people. And that is a wonderful learning space, because in these moments, proponents have to face the reasons why their proposal is not feasible, so they have to understand all the mechanism that works behind technical issues, legal issues, financial issues, okay? And so they have the opportunity to reshape the proposal and going further, and which is very important for going to this moment, that is the votes on projects. Then there is the public presentation of results, and then start the implementation phase, which is a second cycle that will continue to go in parallel with the start of the next year of participatory meetings, okay? So this is an average cycle. In the United States, they work in the same way. So if you take New York, it's a little bit different in New York and Chicago for one reason, which does not interest you too much. That is that in these cities, the member of the municipal assembly, the municipal council, has money, which does not happen in any other place in the world. Usually the only persons that have money are the mayor and his cabinets, or her cabinets, but not the member, the elected member of the council. But in the case of Chicago and New York, there is this specific thing, which gives to the participatory budgeting of these two cities a specific touch, which is fighting against clientelism. Because this money is normally used as a rein to keep all their friends in smiling and voting for them. So in his or her own constituency, each member of the council has 10 million in New York, 10 million euros, $10 million for doing what they want and keeping their friend warm towards them. But they decided that part of this money go directly to participatory budgeting, so people will vote what to do. So they can even lose their traditional clientelistic structure. But what happened is the opposite. The president of the mayor of the 49th district in Chicago was elected with 51% 2 elections ago. And in the last election, after 4 years of participatory budgeting, he was re-elected with almost 65% of votes. And he started telling this story to all his colleagues, and now a lot of colleagues started participatory budgeting in other districts of Chicago, because they understood that even if they lose some discretionality, so capacity of deciding alone what to do with that money, the authority, the moral authority they gain among people is much higher. And so as you see, intelligent politicians know that power is not just about having money and deciding on it, as conquering the trust of people even sometimes through devolving to them the possibility of deciding. So, some other thing, so participatory budgeting is very important, is taking care of managing of expectations. Because if you promise everything to people and then you're not able to do, you have a boomerang again. So it's very important to know that this is an empirical formula, it's not scientific, but I heard it from a politician in Dominican Republic and I transformed it into formula. Is satisfaction is major or equal to results less expectation, okay? That means that the more you are able to deliver results, the more you will have satisfaction. If you're not able to deliver a lot of results because you're bad organized and you don't have money, you have to lower the expectation, honestly, from the beginning. And the only way to do this is to use a co-decisional participatory budgeting. There are participatory budgeting around the world, not in the United States, which are consultative. That means that politicians meet people and say, what do you want for your city? And people list 3,000 things and they say, wonderful, we will make you know what we decide. And so then they do cherry picking, no? They take 3,000 things and they say, we have money for 5, so let's put aside 2,995 things. How can you imagine is the reaction of the 2,995 person who proposed the other things? Frustration. Why? Because normally politicians cannot explain why they are saying no. The only thing they say is there is no money for everything. And people answer, yes, there is no money for everything, but why? Explain me why the thing that my neighbor proposed, yes, and mine not. There is no answer. But people start to give answer to themselves. And the answer is, because this is the cousin of the sister of your director. Or because this person militates in the same party as you. So I have the answer. You don't give me the answer, but I have the answer. And so what we do have to avoid when we do participation are speculations, rumors. So we have to do everything so transparently that we don't have space for rumors. And for doing that, the only way is letting people co-decide the priority and vote in the priority. Okay? So that's my vision. So these are participatory budgeting in Portugal. You see all these dead processes here, the red ones? What were these? Were the consultative ones that died one after the other. Because they didn't fulfill the expectation of people. They were just creating long list of wishing list, and then they were frustrating people doing only 5 things that were already in the program of the mayor. Okay, cherry picking is very dangerous for politics because it has no rules, not explainable reasons. And so in 2012, Portugal finished it with participatory budgeting consultative and only have co-decisional. Now we have 118. We have 308 municipalities, so more than 1/3 of municipalities in Portugal have participatory budgeting. It's the only country with so high density. That is important. And a last thing I wanted to tell you is about inclusion. Sometimes we imagine that doing participation is automatically inclusive, which is definitely not. Inclusion has to be pursued to exist. Otherwise, you can reproduce the exclusion of mainstream society inside participatory processes. This is a case in Senegal, the city of Niaganyao, it's in the Baobab Park. The mayor started the participatory budgeting. There are 2 women out of 37 members of the council, the municipal council, okay? He started the participatory budgeting. traditional mode, a big assembly where people were speaking about their problems and solutions, and there were 60% of women. No women was proposing anything. So the mayor started thinking, why? And then he, reflecting, he saw that the problem was self-censorship. In a society where the people important are the wise, so the elderly persons, and especially if male, there is no space for young people and women. I mean, physically there is, because the majority of people in the assemblies were women and young people. But then they were not speaking. And when they were speaking, they were never contradicting the elderly. So that is self-censorship. Nobody is censoring you. You are saying, I don't want to offend my grandfather, so I will keep my mouth shut. And so, what is the usefulness of participatory budgeting if women are there and do not speak? So he organized a homogeneous group, women, men, elderly, young people. Each one was speaking among similar persons. They were having good discussion, and in the end, 2 members of each group were elected to be the speakers of the group in the General Council. So 2 out of each group. They were listing all the priorities emerging from each group, and then people was voting secretly. So many of the priorities decided, proposed by women won. Okay? So this, as you see, if you want inclusion, you have to challenge the mainstream society, and you have to create a form of the participatory budgeting which is specific for that area. So in Europe, we don't have any participatory budgeting with a big assembly. And in many cities of the United States also, we have, unlike in Latin America, where you have 2,000 people speaking and shouting in a room, we don't accept that because we think we need spaces where people feel at ease. So we created all this small table where people are discussing, and then in the end, you have to go to the plenary. So you have, it's more complicated, yes, it is. Because you need then to bring things to scale up until arriving to a convergence. But it's more important because people who never spoke in their life and feel embarrassed to speak in public because they don't have the words, they are uncultured, and they start to speak in small spaces. So these are processes where, I mean, you start, sometimes you need to separate to make people have the same value in front of the other. The separation is temporary, okay? It's temporary. In this separation, you create awareness and capacities, and then they come back to the others able to speak at the same level. In the United States, it's very important if you read the report of participatory budgeting, and in New York, for example, you see that the steering groups of this participatory budgeting, sorry, I'm moving. The steering groups are done by Association of Protection of Human Rights, Women's Rights, and I have been giving courses, training courses in New York to people in social housing neighborhood. And I gave the courses in Spanish because nobody was speaking English there in New York. And there are groups that work with ex-prisoners. You know, the ex-prisoner that lost their political rights. And this is a way to have them included in society again through participatory budgeting, because they discuss things they need, maybe proposal for an office for ex-prisoner, for finding job after, whatever. But the important is to work on them specifically to re-include in society people that has been expelled by society. And these are processes in Southern America for blind people in schools, okay? And you know, you can use many things. People are not able to read the 2D documents. Yes, you can create maquettes, okay? plastic three-dimensional replication. This is an interesting thing in Portugal. There was a meeting in which there was babysitting because otherwise the young family were not participating. So the babysitter were taking care of the children during the public assembly. And one day she heard an elderly lady saying, I don't understand this map. I don't know where my house is. I cannot read the map. And so she thought maybe if it was 3D, she could read it. And so she asked the kids to use a plastiline to create models of the houses. And they put on the 2D maps, and finally the old lady was able to read the map. So you can use young generation also at the service of the adults, but young generation can be themselves important. For example, in Sevilla, there was a process only for young people and teenagers until 18 years old to do proposals, but they could not vote. And every year there was a moment in January in which the rules of the participatory budgeting were rediscussed with people. And so one day in 2010, the kids gathered together with parents and professors and went to the meeting for discussing the rule and said, we want to vote. And there were so many that they voted for changing the rules, and from that year on was possible to vote in participatory budgeting since 10 years old, 8 years less. So they constructed their right to vote because in the parallel process where they could not vote, their awareness was raised about what means to be included. It's not just to propose, it's propose and vote. Okay, so I finish with these two images. This is Paris, the biggest participatory budgeting in Europe in this moment, 105 millions, 65 for the districts, 10 for the schools, and 30 for citywide projects. It seems nothing, these three data, but that means that this process is trying to teach to people that city is not just their small area in which they live. City goes beyond affective maps. So they need to think about city so they can choose a part of money for their area, but the other has to be decided for policies for the entire city of Paris. And then 15 millions of these 105, and this year will be 30 millions, need to be given to vulnerable social areas. Okay, so there is an integration of social issues inside the participatory budgeting. But there is more. These 65 millions for districts are not given like this. Districts have their own budgets. So the municipality said, if the district participates to participatory budgeting, putting on discussion part of their own money, we will give 2 euros for each euros they will put on the discussion. So this is an incentive mechanism for district to be opening their budget to people. So the more the district open the budget, the more they receive more budget for the municipality, the more thing they can do. So there is like a sort of competition, virtuous competition out of all the districts of Paris to put more money on participatory budget in order to receive more money from the municipality. So you see in 3 lines, you have an entire world that is moving in participatory budgeting. And this is Madrid. Madrid has 100 million on participatory budgeting, also divided into district and the entire city. But in parallel, they have this, the side Madrid have this other process, which is interesting, which is for, you see these things that say, do you feel a cat? So you mean, you go in the main pages of participatory budget and you say, do you feel like a cat? You say, what the hell is this? So you go, you click there, definitely. And you go in far, if you feel like a cat because you are a teacher, a leader in a young people association, you can help to create a pedagogy for young people in participatory budgeting. And so there is all a system to train professors, young leaders, in order to move and try to circulate the idea of participatory budgeting like a cat around the city among the youngest people. And so I think it's good to finish, otherwise you will not have time to. I had one thing that I think could be interesting, that was about environmental issues, that is here. Okay. To finish, in order to link to your type of works. You know that taking decision on environment is not easy. Many of the decisions on the environment are taken on despite people will. And in participatory processes, it's difficult sometimes to make people vote for dispolluting a lake. This was the case of Porto Alegre. The municipality had 100% of investments under participatory budgeting. So if people was not voting for the dispollution of the lake, there was no way to dispollute the lake. So the municipality had an interesting idea. That was, let's try to dispollute the lake without spending money. So how to do that? Let's put a rule that the first, because people was asking for reallocation of poor people into social housing, from slums, okay, from shanty towns to social housing. So the idea is, let's put a criteria. Who is living around a river or a lake will have the priority in relocation. Because when people from this area are going away, they are stopping polluting the lake or the river, and so they are contributing to the least pollution. People accepted, and after 3 years, it was possible to take a swim in the Lamy beach, and then now in 20 different beaches in the lake of Porto Alegre. That means that after the first beach was reopened, poor people, they were the ones they were saying, no, we will not pay for dispolluting the lake, because this is useless. Environment is something about the rich people who want to bring their dogs in a nice park and they have a pet cemetery, okay? We have to survive. So we are not interested to fund this. But when you dispollute the lake and people, Porto Alegre, it's called Porto Alegre, but it's 100 kilometers from the first beach. So if poor people wanted to go to the beach, because here was forbidden to swim, they had to do 100 kilometers. Now they could do in 10 minutes with their bike. So they start to understand that environmental thing could be a measure for giving quality of life also to them. And it's not about rich people that have their money. And so from this moment on, that was 2002, I think, people started to fund the dispollution of the lake in order that it could go faster than just with the method they had imagined. But it was important, the demonstrated thing. One beach created 21 beaches in few years through this mechanism. So you see the pedagogy inside the mechanism. The pedagogy is done of a tension between the municipality and the people. So I think that the conclusion, the only conclusion I wanted to give to you is that one. Something happened. No, okay, sorry. The only conclusion I wanted to tell you was this one. Participation, we can imagine sometime that is about just dialogue. It's not about dialogue, it's a special type of dialogue. This dialogue for me is not participation. If you have like a form in the website of the municipality, when people can claim, I'd say their problem or suggest a thing, and this go just to the politician without no dialogue with other citizens, I think this is completely useless as a participation. I have this an example. I did master plans. I coordinate master plans, okay, as a planner. In the master plan, you do a draft, then you expose to people. People are free to give their comments. And normally, what are their comments? 90% of their comments are, why did you limitate the construction index in this area that by chance is my property? And so each one of them tried to maximize the construction potential of their area. That was normally the comments on a master plan. But if you start to put in a public discussion in master plan and ask to people to join together and do collective notes to the plan, you start creating a dialogue which is not just vertical, it's horizontal. So while people is dialoguing politics, they are dialoguing with each other and with the institution of society, which maybe are also lobbies, but are also deposits of knowledge from many years working on specific issues. So the system we want, the participatory budgeting we want, is something like this. It's a process in which society discusses about things and then present the proposal and the solution to the officials. In this way, the official will give much more credits to what's happening here. Because the reaction I got from my mayors when I was working here was, again, asking why you don't increase their construction capacity in their properties. Please, answer no. So my answer to like 300 comments here was, it's not possible because it's not possible. And they say, why it's not possible because it's not possible? Because it's against the philosophy of the plan. Well, what does it mean, the philosophy of the plan? Read the plan and you will know why it's not possible to answer yes to your question. And so there was no dialogue. This is a rubber wall in which the language is self-referential, in which between people and politics, there is not a dialogue. But that's because the tool is wrong. So if you create a tool for people to dialogue directly with the politics and not dialogue among each other, people will be egoistic. Because if you ask me what you want for your neighborhood, I will answer what I want for my neighborhood. So I will think about myself and my things. So the problem is that many of the process of so-called participation that we created are wrong. And when they are wrong, people say wrong things. And politicians think, I cannot open spaces of co-decision for people which are so egoistic, no capable solidarity, so I will not give public money for them to decide. And so the more the system fuel egoistic visions, the more politicians will keep restrictions on the spaces for co-decision. The more you open the possibility of creating solidarity, public discussion on public issues, the more politicians will say, oh, people are good. They are proposing things for the sake of new immigrants, for the sake of blind people, for the sake of disabled. So I will open more and more spaces of co-decision. So in my experience in all these 22 years that I work on participatory projects, and especially on participatory budgeting, the only way to create a virtuous circle is to create the right process of participation, which is not simple, because you have to explain to politicians why they would have benefits in opening space of participation, because many of them have the ideology that I have been elected to decide. That's your vision. Another vision of politics is that you are elected to guide people to good decision. This is the vision of politics I have, and that's why I accepted to do this political work in the Agency for Participation of Tuscany, although I hate party politics and I will never fit with party politics, but I was elected by all the parties together, so I decided that I was free enough from any specific affiliation to be able to deliver this type of work. And I believe that it's a very long process to convince politicians to bet on participation, but the intelligent ones that I found in my life understood that power is about many things, and many of these things are moral authority that you gain to people when you intelligently create intelligent space of participation for good deliberation. So that is the virtuous circle that I imagine